Hey everybody, Freddie here with another video. Today we're going to continue with the conversation about BCDR, business continuity and disaster recovery. We're going to start talking about how to protect VMs that are already running in Azure. We're going to start talking about the service called Site Recovery, which is the one that we're going to be using to do the replication from one region to another region. I'm going to be diving deep into the conversation about how site recovery works, how you can manage it, how you can configure it, how you can do a test failover, and then how you can also do a failover, and the things to consider. So we're going to dive deep into this subject. I'm going to jump into the portal so I can show you the demo on how to do this. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. It's nice to be able to get more members. I would love to reach 10,000 by the end of this year, so I hope you help me on that. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something, and let's get to it. As always, in every single demo video that I create, I always like to do the terminology. I like to look at the architecture. I like to look at all those details first, and then we jump into the demo. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about what Azure Site Recovery is. Azure Site Recovery is the one that orchestrates the replication. In this presentation, it says on-premises environments, but not only does on-premises, but it also does a VM to VM. So if you have a region in West US and you want to replicate that to East US or US Central or any other region, you can do that with Azure Site Recovery. Also, it allows you to replicate VMs that might be running on-prem. For example, you have VMware or you have Hyper-V running on-prem, and you want to replicate that into Azure to have Azure as a site recovery location. You can do that as well. So there's a lot of little details, a lot of things that you can do with this service. But the main thing that we're going to focus in this video is we're going to be focusing on the replication of VM from one region to another region. In this case, we have a source environment that is in the East US. As you can see here, we have two virtual machines and one subnet and one VNet. They both have a disk, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a target region of Central US. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to jump into the demonstration on how to do that. So let's go ahead and start by talking about some of the things that Azure Site Recovery is good at. The thing that Azure Site Recovery is really good at is the automation of replication of the virtual machines to the target region. So in other words, it takes that VM block by block and it replicates it to the target region based on the replication schedule that you set up. You can tell it to replicate every 5 minutes, for example. So every 5 minutes, it creates that snapshot of the data to make sure that you can recover up to 5 minutes ago. This, again, if you remember from other videos, and if you haven't watched the other videos, please do so. This is, we get into the conversation about RTO and RPO. So you need to define those two values, the RTO, the recovery time objective, and the recovery point objective, because you need to understand those in order to understand what your recovery is going to be. Are you going to be replicating every 5 minutes? Are you going to be replicating every 10 minutes? So if you set it up for every 5 minutes, there's going to be a new snapshot that is going to be created. So in one day, in 24 hours, you're going to end up with 280 some snapshots. That's a lot of data. You can also choose what you're going to do with those snapshots, the retention period of those snapshots. If you want to keep them for longer than 24 hours, you can do so. Typically, we say if you're going to use snapshots every 5 minutes, then that means that you can choose any of those 280 plus snapshots to recover from. So that's a lot of snapshots. So typically 24 hours, the retention value, typically 24 hours is good. But that's what ASR is good at. ASR is great at replicating that environment to a different region. It supports different workloads, so it gives you the flexibility of giving your environment a disaster recovery service that will keep your VMs synchronized. It reduces the cost as well. The way that it reduces the cost is because Like I pointed out in previous videos, you have the HA, which is the high availability method, which means that you're going to have an active system, both of them running at the same time. That is not ASR. ASR, or Azure Site Recovery, is more of a disaster recovery service that allows you to have your active environment and you can have a passive environment running, which means that the systems are not up and running all the time. So the way that it works is that when there is a disaster recovery, you're replicating from the source environment to the target environment. And when there is a fail region, for example, then if the whole system goes down, then what happens here is that that's when the VM becomes available. If there is no disaster, only the disk is being replicated. You end up with the disk on the other side, but no VM. So you're not paying for compute, you're only paying for storage. So when you look at the cost, you're looking at the cost of I'm going to call it a licensing, because Azure Site Recovery does require, I believe it's a $25 fee per VM. That is more of a licensing than anything else. But it also, you also have to take in consideration the storage that you're going to be paying, because it is creating a storage disk on the other side. When that disk is created, then that means that you're going to be paying for this disk on this side. When there is a disaster and you decide to fail over, that's when the VM is going to come up, and that's when you're going to start paying for compute. Not before that. Before that, it's only storage. So that's what ASR is very good at. Let's move on. That's what that is. From the configuration point of view, you got to have your source VMs and you're going to have your target configuration as well. You're going to configure the replication settings, which is how many, the frequency, how many snapshots you're going to have. So that's the frequency, how often you're going to do those snapshots, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. And also you need to select the frequency and also the retention period of how long you're going to keep that. And finally, you're going to enable the replication. Once that replication is initiated, then Azure will keep that information synchronized. So let's jump into the portal, and I'm going to start showing you how easy it is to set this up. When we're in the portal, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the Recovery Services Vault, because this is what is required for this service to operate. I have a few that I have already created. The one that I'm going to be focusing on is this ASR Demo Vault. The thing that you have to remember is that this Recovery Services Vault, you cannot, for best practices, don't create it in the same region as the region that you're protecting. Again, if I'm going to be protecting the East US and I'm going to be replicating East US to the West, my Recovery Services Vault should be in other region like Central, because you don't want to keep it in the East US. If East US goes down, your Recovery Services Vault will go down as well. So don't put it in the same, put it in a different one. So in this case, I'm going to be protecting West, and I'm going to be protecting West US 3 to Central US. So my Recovery Services Vault is going to be in East US. When you create the Recovery Services Vault, this is when you select the region where you want it. Again, choose a different one, not the same one. The next thing that you have to choose is the redundancy, the geo-redundant, local redundant. This is the LRS, ZRS, or GRS. We talked about that in the storage video, so if you haven't watched that, please do so. And then encryption, this is all about the keys, the properties, if you want to set up the vault to be immutable, so there's no changes. And then also networking, if you're going to use private endpoints or you're going to allow public access. Those are the options that you have when you create a Recovery Services Vault. Once you have the Recovery Services Vault created, then you can go into that vault and you're going to enable site recovery, which is this button right here. That is the step. Once you enable site recovery, then you can tell it which workload you're going to do. Are you going to do virtual machine to virtual machine, VMware to Azure, or Hyper-V to Azure? In this case, we're going to do virtual machines to virtual machines. So we're going to click enable replication. And the next thing it's going to ask you is which region is going to be the source. Like I said, my source is going to be West US 3. It's going to be my subscription and my resource group where my VMs are located. Then it's going to ask me, do I have any classic? I said no. And then disaster recovery between availability zones. I'm going to say no to that in this case. The next thing it's going to ask me is which virtual machines do I want to protect? It's going to give me all the virtual machines that are part of that resource group that I selected as the source. And then I can select the virtual machines that I want to protect. Just remember, it's only going to show you the ones in that resource group that you selected as the source. So one of them is not running. That's fine. So let's choose those two. And then it says the target. Where are you going to send it to? I was in West US 3. Where am I going to send it? I can send it anywhere. I can send it to whatever I want. I can say I'm going to be going to East US. It's going to be a target subscription and a target resource group. If there is no resource group that is created, it'll try to create one for you, and it'll be ASR. I created one, but you can create one if you want. And then the network as well. You can create a new VM. You can set up a failover subnet. And the storage and all that. Capacity reservation. Capacity reservation is actually a good topic that is good to point out as best practices. A lot of times customers say, well, I set up ASR because my VMs are not running. I don't have the compute running. And when I try to do a failover, then there is no capacity in that region. And that could happen. It's a possibility. So one of the things that you can do is you can do capacity reservation. Capacity reservation allows you to reserve that capacity. When you're not using it, you are going to be paying some amount for that ability to have that capacity. Once that capacity comes up, then you're only going to be paying for the VM price, not both, not the capacity in the VM price. So that's something to keep in mind. But it's something that is actually a good practice. Just because if there is a failover, you don't want to find out that you don't have capacity in that region in that moment. Mainly when you're trying to use very specific VMs like an NC12 or something with a very high-end GPU. It is recommended that you do a capacity reservation just to make sure. So moving forward with that, then the next thing is you are going to talk about the replication. And as I mentioned before, the thing that you have to remember is the replication policy, the retention policy. Here it says a 24-hour retention. So you can create a new one if you want. And if you say create a new, it'll say give it a name and retention period in days. And that's pretty much all it's asking you to do. So in this case, the default is 24 hours. That's fine. And it's going to do every 5 minutes by default. And then it's going to say allow extension settings, allow ASR to manage. This one is every time you select a virtual machines and ASR, what happens is that there is an extension that is added to the VM. That extension is an agent. So there's an agent that is installed in the VM, which is the ASR agent. And this is how that VM is able to replicate to another location. So this one right here, it just says that's what the extension is doing. There's also an automation account that is created. This automation account is empty. It's just created as a placeholder because ASR does not do the failover automatically for you. You do have to have some manual intervention where you can click the button and everything fails over. But you can set up a run book, for example, that will do that for you. And this automation account is the one that is set up so you can do that. So the next thing that we're going to look at is just the details here. And you can click on Enable Replication. When you click on Enable Replication, what it does is it starts replicating the systems. In this demo, I already have the systems replicated. There's two that says that they're critical, and one of them that it says healthy. So one of them here, it says that it's critical. Protection could not be enabled, which can happen, right? It's not, things sometimes fail in real life. The agent status is healthy, the agent version, no issues, but it says that the protection could not be enabled. And then you can look at the error message here that says replication could not be configured for the virtual machine. Check that the enable replication job for more details. Resolve the issue. So here you can see that there's issues with this replication. It also tells you where it's going from into. So then right here you can start digging in to see what the problem was with this virtual machine. The other thing is there are some that are healthy. So clean up, test, failover pending. The reason these ones are in critical is because I just just started the machine. They were powered off. So this is why they're showing that they're critical. Maybe the machine is not even up yet. This one, the virtual machine has been powered up after a shutdown, and replication has resumed or will resume in the virtual machine. Replication health will be computed again at this time. So it tells you that it was critical, but now it's healthy, and it tells you that everything is running, everything is good. In this case, it tells you that the infrastructure, West US 3 is the source, East US is the destination, takes the virtual machine, takes the storage account, and then it says Azure Site Recovery, and it's being replicated to one disk. This right here is the one that shows you that the virtual machine itself is being replicated into a disk. The disk is only a disk, so there is no VM running, and this is the reason why it's showing like this. The other thing that is important to see here is cleanup test failover. I did a test failover, so you can see here it's telling me that because after the failover you need to do a cleanup. So this is doing the cleanup, but once you clean it up, then you're gonna have this button back again where you can test the failover again. What does the test failover does? When you do a test failover, what it's doing is it's just trying to bring up that VM, make sure that all the checkpoints are good, make sure the data is being replicated, and then it's bringing up that VM, making sure that it's gonna come up without any issues. It's very important to do a test failover, just because you don't want to find out that something happened with your data and you're not able to fail over in that moment when you need it the most. It's always a good practice to test, and this is what this is giving. There's a test failover and there's a failover. If you do a failover, then that means that everything is gonna fail over to the target. If you do a test failover, it's gonna fail over, but it's not gonna completely fail over. It's just gonna bring up the systems on the other side. Now, if you do a failover completely, then everything moves to the other side. You may want to set up a traffic manager that will handle the DNS for you, so you can use one entry point to your application, so that traffic manager, if there's a failover, it'll send all the information, all the requests to the secondary region, not the primary region. There are two types of failover that can take place. One of them is planned, the other one is unplanned. The one when it's planned, you're gonna plan it, you're gonna test it. One of the things that is recommended is that you turn off the VMs to make sure that there is no data loss. That way it's planned, it's very clean, and then you do a failover. The other one is the one that is not planned, the one that just happens, and then you have to recover from a snapshot. When you do a failover, you have this button here that says failover. This is the one that you do. You do a failover. There is no failback button, as you can see here. One of the things that people ask is, well, how do I do a failback? Which is very important. Once the region comes back and you want to move back to the original location, there is no failback, but there is a reprotect button that is right here. This reprotect button, what it does is it tries to synchronize the data back to the original location. So you look at this VM, and when you do a reprotect, what it's doing is it's sending the data back to the original location, so you can do a failback in that in that case. And that's the end of this video, because ASR is not very difficult to set up on a VM to VM configuration. I mean, if you go from one region to another region. So I hope you learned something. I hope this video was beneficial to you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the section down below. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. So if you can help me with that, that would be great. And until next time, take care.